Hi, Mary Beth. Can you hear us?
Oh,
Yes.
Oh, well, welcome here. I'm very glad to have you. I want to introduce you to these folks here. You can see, I think, names around the horn here. Larry Clements is with us. Steve Smith, uh,
hello.
Steve Eilers, and Stan Hitron. Now, both Steve and Steve have been the subjects of interviews about their artwork, and I know they're very eager, as are Larry and Stan and I, to get started here. So I'm gonna ask one of them to kick us off. I hope they have some good questions for you. Don't put you on the spot too much, but
Mary Beth, I enjoyed the interview and appreciate hearing a little bit more about how you use art in your therapy practice. You had one slide that you put up that showed two different approaches. One was art as therapy, and one was art as psychotherapy. Could you explain the difference between those a little bit?
Sure. I was going to say, and as you all know, being artists, engaging in art is therapeutic, whether you're creating a craft or you're just doodling. Um, and I appreciated that I think Dustin was talking about in his piece. So there's something very therapeutic in creating. And we are all born creators until someone tells us that we're not. So in and of itself, art as therapy is true, just engaging. Art psychotherapy is going a little bit deeper and using the whatever the created piece of art is as a focal point to talk about what might be going on in the person's life, how things show up. Again, we talk a lot in metaphor. And so, even as it was the other Steve's, I just finished watching his video and just, even thinking about how the paints are mixed, oil and water, and what that looks like. How does that show up in your day-to-day life? Um, so there's a little bit more conversation and psychotherapy involved with art psychotherapy, whereas engaging in art as therapy is engaging in creation.
Thank you. I think that explanation made the light bulb go on for me. I didn't realize the one was just talking about you're just doing art, and that is in itself a therapy.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah. So,
how do you feel about that, Steve? Is that what
Oh,
you experience? Is it?
yes, it's definitely therapy. I've also often talked about it as you kind of getting into a flow as you're doing it and lose track of time, and you're just uh, dealing with the materials in front of you and what you're expressing with those materials. It's hard to say, but well, it might be just like you shift over into using the right side of your brain, and you're not analyzing it. You're just in the space of doing it. So
yes.
Okay.
yeah, I've often felt. I mean, some people are left brain dominated or right brain dominated. I've always felt like I'm sort of in the middle and go back and forth, uh,
Hmm.
and so it's a nice experience.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Someone else? Steve, did you locate a question?
Uh, no, I actually couldn't find my notes, but I did have some questions. And I also wanted to mention, as you mentioned in the video, I met a teacher. I think she teaches first grade, second grade, and she uses art in the way I think all teachers should be using art as to getting through to children. And she showed me what she did every morning when the children come. She's got something drawn on the blackboard with colored chalks, and the kids love it. It has to, if someone's having a birthday, it has to do with a birthday or some other event. And then instead of writing like a schedule on the board or just writing on the blackboard, she'll take and draw like a tree. And then this branch will have this activity, and this branch represents this activity. And the kids, rather than just looking up at the board and seeing a bunch of writing up there, they see a picture, and that really connects them with the assignment and what she's actually trying to teach. And I just thought it was just brilliant. And everything that she was doing with these children had to do with the visuals that
Yeah,
she was putting in front of them. And that was really, she was telling me that connects these children immediately. Um, More than a lecture, more than words, more than actions. It's those visuals that they connect with.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I
But like I
totally
said, I
agree.
think all schools should be art schools.
I
That's what,
totally agree with you. Absolutely. I think that that would help a whole lot because even, if you just think about human development as young babies, we don't have the verbal language until we get in school and learn words. But really, the art of children is play, and they figure so much out through play. And, that is play and art go hand in hand to help kids learn. And, I get parents that will bring their kids to me that they're like, 5 years old, and the teacher says they have ADHD because they can't stay in their seat. And I'm like, what 5-year-old can stay in their seat? I'm like close to 60 and I can't stay in my seat. So, the expectations that, kids are learning about their bodies, they learn that through movement. How much space do I take up? And like, what happens if I, do something like this? So, art and play are very important.
yeah, they're very much connected. I see that.
Yeah.
Once again, it's a shame that the school system hasn't figured that out
Yeah. Yeah.
because she's getting incredible results with her students,
I bet
as
she
young as they
is.
are.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I showed Michael a portrait of one of her child who's 6 years old, and of course he's not even in school yet. But he's doing math at a high school level.
Hmm.
Square roots, and I mean, unbelievable what this child has done. And I think again, I mean, he's a special child, obviously,
Sure.
but she uses art with everything that they do. I mean, that's just a hands-on deal from the time that he was a child.
That's
I mean, a
fantastic.
baby.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
In my experience in education, I've always felt like uh, the curriculum is determined by what we can test for.
Yeah.
Success is measured on how well you do on a test.
How
And
much it meant.
art,
Well,
yeah, but
yeah,
art is very difficult to test.
yeah,
Unlike,
memorize.
yeah.
It's all about memorizing to me. When I was a child going through school, everything was about memorizing. And I had a hard time with it. I'm sure some of you guys did too. But I think going through, again through visuals, like you were saying, Mary Beth, boy, it really connected me. I could look at a blackboard full of writing and just blank out.
Hmm.
But something had to do with visuals. I would connect with it really quick.
Absolutely. And Michael, I think, to your point, that's why up until, within the last 10 years or so, I think that's why art therapy hasn't been taken very seriously, is because how do you measure whether or not it's working? Because it's rather subjective. People enjoy it and, but you can't measure, okay, how have they improved? But again, based on what we know about, neuroimaging and what's happening in the brain, we can see that different areas of the brain light up when we're engaged in creating an art. So that's been a huge boost to the field.
I've got a question. Michael, you were in the prison system. I think you were too, weren't you?
Dave, and
Dave?
Mary were
That's
also.
right.
Was there an art program for prisoners to engage with? Did they use art in any way to get through to the inmates?
Dave, you want to
Well,
take that?
we had these are the old days in the Kentucky State Reformatory, and one Marcia Rosal
Hmm.
was a you knew her, you
I was lucky enough to
know of her.
study under her and Dr. Sandra Caven Graves Alcorn and Via Lusabrink. And
Ah,
actually,
way
um,
back to the
yeah,
original. Yeah.
absolutely. And I was going to say, are you going to talk about Joy Ackerman?
Yeah, well, what I wanted to is tell you, answer your question or Steve's question. is how this worked. Well, through Marcia and another woman who was loosely connected with, they were friends, really. Um, and Frances Purdy, if you ever knew her. We connected with them, and it turned out that they had a guy named David Kegel who was a student looking for a practicum.
Mhm.
And he lit up when we invited him out, took a look. I got permission from the authorities, and we took David in as a semester. He did his practicum out there.
Nice.
That was an eye opener because he worked through the art workshop. Whoever wanted to come in, we did a little bit of referral around. Michael, I don't know if you remember that
I
those days.
do. Yeah.
Okay, but that was the essence of it, and I'm still connected with David Kegel, a remarkable guy and a very good artist on his own. So that kind of, Steve, that will help set up the question here, or what your question.
Well, I was asked Mary Beth. I think I would assume that what you're doing with the classroom with the children could also work with inmates.
Well, absolutely. And I was going to say, I'm the program director of, it used to be called the Expressive Therapies program at U of L, but it's now called Art Therapy. And we used to have students that went to the reformatory, but we don't currently. But we have had for the last, I'm going to say, maybe 3 or 4 years, we have had practicum and internship students at the Women's Correctional Facility.
Ah, yeah.
So yes, absolutely works great. I mean, I really can't think of any population or any particular mental health diagnosis that art therapy is not good for. Like it's great for everybody.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, I believe that for
May
sure.
I make a recommendation for those of you who haven't seen it yet? I just watched a couple of days ago a documentary on Netflix, not very long, I think only less than an hour or so, but it's about quilters. And the quilters are all inmates of a maximum security prison in Missouri.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating documentary done very well.
Awesome.
And I think the quilting as an art seemed to have a big benefit for those inmates.
Sure.
Mary Beth, a question.
Mhm.
Um, how many different how many different expressive therapies are there? Uh, Dance, music, art, dramatic,
Drama.
maybe.
Yep.
Are there more? Are there?
I think those are the biggest ones because even
Okay.
just like the evolution of U of L's program, it was called expressive therapies back in the day because other than music therapy, there weren't individualized programs for dance and movement and drama therapy. Um, and so, since all those fields have grown, at U of L, we decided to pull back and make it primarily art therapy because we are looking at visual arts. So it's not so much, I mean, definitely movement is important, but you need a whole degree in movement and dance therapy if that's what you're going to specialize in. But, you know, um, even if we talk about, different cultures and different ethnicities, there's art is a central component in all of them, right? And
Right.
so dance and music and visual arts, and they're all healing.
I want to make sure everybody has a chance to
Yeah.
pose a question. Stan or Larry, do you have something for Mary Beth?
Not at the moment. I'm just taking it all in. It's interesting.
I
Thank
was
you.
curious, Stan, because if I can maybe prompt a question here, one of the things that surprises me is the fact that Americans, maybe this is more universal, but focusing on Americans, Americans are very visually oriented. They buy shiny apples, not healthy apples. They they respond to things they see. When we watch news, the things that catch our attention are the visual aspects. If you watch the evening news now, they're picking up images recorded on cell phones and that becomes news because it's visual. The old expression is if it bleeds, it leads. Well, if it can be seen in a visual, it makes the 6 o'clock news. But on the other hand, we don't express ourselves visually as a culture. We leave that up to someone else to provide us with the visual imagery. Is that is that something that has changed over time? Or have things always been that way and I just didn't notice? Or is it, are we losing our ability to express ourselves visually? We don't
Oh,
do handwriting anymore, so we lose that self-expression, if you will, in the way we form our letters and the way we manipulate the media. Are we moving away from that as expression?
visual media is very, very powerful, and it's I for years my background is I taught English and humanities in a community college for 30 years, and towards the end of my career, I took up a film course that someone retired, didn't want to teach it anymore, and it was part of the communications department, mass communications. But I know in teaching film, the the engagement was much more immediate and much more in depth than it would be with a work of literature. And even today, I teach a course in a lifelong learning collaborative out of Newton, Massachusetts, and it's a film course, and people just love it. They just, they're like, I always have, I'm always letting in people above the limit, and I have the same students semester after semester. And there's something about the visual medium and film that is just so engaging. It's so powerful. It's you can get more out of a film if you analyze it. Definitely, I believe in that, and but just the immediate experience is just so impactful, uh, especially in a theater where you have the big screen and everything. So I just think visual media is just it's more immediate. I mean, your first experience with the world is visual. And you only learn to read because somebody makes you. you know. So, uh, but at the same time, I also volunteered for a program called Changing Lives Through Literature. A colleague of mine, she taught Shakespeare she did Shakespeare plays for women at the Correctional Institute for Women in Massachusetts, and she wrote a book about it called Shakespeare Behind Bars. And so she got me involved in this program, and it was literature as art. We read interpretive literature, and that program was. I mean, in some cases, it depended on the like it was a judge, a parole officer, me, and five or six guys that opted to take this course instead of having cut days off their sentence or whatever. And but the results were they found that that people that went through this program were less likely to reoffend than people that didn't. So and I think I think it was it's the literature, but it's also the recognizing the individual and their response as something that is valued, and then they feel valued because they are taken seriously, and they're so literature art as literature is also effective, but the Michael the I think the visual is just so much more immediate and and powerful than the written word. I
Well, you're
just
right, Stan, and visuals stick with you
Yeah.
for the longest time. Think of the things that we've seen in our lifetime. The little girl that was napalm running naked
Mm.
down the street in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And the last picture of Trump with the bleeding and the American flag behind him. I mean, these are the first pictures of the whole Earth from space. Visuals like that stick with people forever and ever. And I mean, they become part of our DNA almost.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I wanted to get around to a question, Mary Beth.
One flaw in this ointment is AI,
Yes.
where
Yeah,
where what is real and what is created, what is artificial. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with creation, with the things from the imagination, but when visual imagery is used to advance a certain political position or whatever in such a way that it lies, it just
yeah,
Mhm.
I mean that's they're abusing the power of the image.
Mhm.
yeah. But I want to get to a question while we can, if we can, about the use of AI in what you're doing, Mary Beth. Is there any future in AI to help you, to aid you, to guide you, to assist you?
Um, Probably. At this point, one, I don't know enough about it. Two, we have students that, I mean, it's clearly spelled out on the syllabi that you cannot use that for, writing your papers. And yet, and we're talking students at the graduate level, but I want to say this past fall, spring had the most occurrences of plagiarism because folks had used AI to either, add to their paper or do the references, but then if you went and looked for those references, they were non-existent. So, um, can it be helpful? Yes. But then I also think that just, recently I was doom scrolling on Facebook and there was this beautiful, somebody talked about the quilting. There was this gorgeous quilt that kind of looked like the beach behind me. And, had just like nice calm pattern at the top and then it went down and it had the water and then what looked like very textural pebbles at the bottom of the quilt. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's beautiful. I can't quilt to save my life, but beautiful. But then in looking at some of the comments, folks said, you know what, that's AI. And I was like, man,
Mhm. It's
so is there a space for it? Probably. I don't know enough about it myself and I don't use it because I'm old school and we had even talked about writing and reading and there's studies that are shown too and that's why I have my you can't see it but my piece of paper and writing things down um, because that helps me to remember. But if I were to sit here and take notes on my computer as I'm talking with you all, that wouldn't even register with me because there's something about that hand-eye coordination with putting
Yeah.
something down on paper that connects with it in the brain. So I'm still too much of a neophyte to know much about AI. It scares
I
me.
was with my grandchildren today, and I learned a whole lot about AI because I don't know a whole lot about it at all.
Yeah.
But what I'm hearing from them, not only is it still in its infancy, but it's growing incredibly fast. What
absolutely.
they can do, what's available in the future, in the even the near future. Do any of you guys know much more about the
Well,
capabilities of AI?
one of the things, if you watched the video of the interview with Mary Beth, you
I
saw at the
did.
end, I was talking to her about AI and I was trying to think of something and I just said, well, what if I wanted to draw a picture of a dinosaur playing chess with a toadstool?
And I
That
appreciated
that was
that.
just something I was trying
Yeah,
to think of something ridiculous.
yeah.
I went in to use AI. I said, draw me a picture of a dinosaur playing chess with a toadstool, and it took about 35 seconds for it to give me that picture.
Yeah, I saw that. That's what brought up the AI thing,
Yeah.
and
I
what
think
kind of
it's
do we have?
it's a real challenge, and it's going to be interesting, Mary Beth, because I have two teenage grandchildren, and they're both adept at it.
Mm.
And you do the sandbox where
Mhm.
you're taking pre-made figures and placing them within context. And there's really not a quantum difference between that and what AI can do with a photograph. So I don't know whether asking a child to, particularly so if someone is not comfortable with paint or pencil or charcoal or something, asking them to envision something and then having AI draw it for them,
Mhm.
could that possibly be a way of reaching them, of getting them to express themselves?
Well, and see, and here's kind of the conundrum with that, because Stan, you were talking about the power of film, and it's like, if you think about sitting in a movie theater and you've got this big screen in front of you and all the sound effects that go with that, you're getting a huge sensory input. It's not just visual. You've got, the audio, and depending on how big the subwoofers are, you might be getting a vibration too.
Mhm.
And it's the same way, like with the sand tray, there's still that sensory component of handling the miniatures, putting them in the sand. Some folks will touch the sand, some won't. Um, and so it's a bigger sensory experience. And I think one of the things that I have seen, and I've not looked for studies on this, but just in terms of my 30 plus years in this field and thinking about, video games and stuff like that, because I mean, like the video game that I saw as late teenager was Pong. Um, so
One
that
of
dates
my
me.
favorites, yeah.
Um, but again, even with video games that kids are playing or what they're watching on YouTube, it doesn't really leave anything to the imagination. Like the graphics are there, all the visuals are there, and even it was whatever the 50th anniversary of Jaws or whatever. I mean, like, you didn't even have to see the shark in the very first scene to know that there was something under the water that was dangerous, and that was already giving you some sort of experience
Yeah.
that led up to that. And
Immediate,
so I
right.
think, technology is really wonderful, but at the same time, I wonder how much is that harming, because I've seen, again, kids that, spend a lot of time on their screens and playing video games. I ask them to draw me a person and I get like this square thing from Minecraft. And it's like, ugh,
Mhm.
like, you know, and so yeah, I mean, I don't know as there's an answer. It's being developed very quickly. And I don't think we, have all the data on how its effects are going to be, and what kind of, you know, sensory input are we going to cease to have as humans if everything is already spelled out for us visually and
Hmm.
everywhere else.
So perhaps the need for therapists is going to grow in
Job
quantum.
security.
Uh, Larry, I want to make sure that there's a chance for you for a question. I hadn't heard from you. I don't want to push it, but
I'm kind of stuck in the old paradigm of talk therapy and trying to figure out how you engage in a drawing or like a physical tactile sense. A person shows up for therapy there. I've been aware of art therapy for a long time. I knew Sandra Kagan way back in the day when I think they were over on Second and Broadway at that point in time. And one of my clients, as I was a parole officer, one of my clients was undergoing therapy there with one of her staff. And, I thought it was just a very intriguing approach. But I'm trying to make the connection of if you're engaging someone in this particular modality, how you switch it from the didactic into something that is more tactile with actually doing something that's drawing or forming some type of a model.
Well, I was going to
Get
say,
into this.
I have a great example of a woman that came to me who's very much, um, I would call her left brain. She's very thinking. She comes from a wellness model, and trying to figure some things out in her life. And so I gave her some oil pastels and a piece of paper, and I said, okay, so just using line, shape, and color, show me what mad looks like.
Mhm.
And so she drew red square. And then I asked her for what sad looked like. This one got to be a little bit more concrete, and interestingly, it was more of like a, beige color of all things, but it was a broken heart. Um, and then scared were these really huge orangish lightning bolts.
Hmm.
And then joy was, I wouldn't really say a sun, but it was like a nice big oval that just kind of radiated out. And so I think that was probably her first time ever engaging in something like that. But then we were able to see, okay, so obviously the biggest thing on there was her joy, so we were able to talk about that. And indeed, she tends to focus more on the positive and the joyful things in her life, whereas her partner tends to be, you know, Eeyore and doom and gloom, and they kind of miss each other because they're just oriented differently.
Hmm.
Um, and it was, we talked about that and how that shows up and how she's really scared about some things that are coming up, and that's why the lightning bolts were huge. But then when I saw her the following week, she says, I've been thinking about this, and that red square, do you think that means anything that I keep my anger all kind of just tucked away into this little compartment?
Hmm.
So that allowed us to go back in and, look at that a little bit more. And so we did another little exercise with that that brought some more clarity that, you know, no, like I trying to think what I asked her to do. It was, okay, so if the anger wasn't boxed up like that, what would it look like? And
Hmm.
so it was kind of like this huge explosion.
Hmm.
Um, and so we were able to talk about, the difference between reacting to something versus responding to something. And so it's helpful because you could come in and you could say all the right words and convince me that you are just doing fine and you have no need for therapy. But then if I ask you to put something down on paper, your unconscious isn't going to lie.
Yeah.
Words can lie, but your unconscious is going to show up. And that's why, when we work with students too, you have to approach it gingerly, because if too much of your unconscious comes out on that first piece of paper, you're going to think I see whatever you're seeing, but that's not necessarily true because you only know about what you put down there. But that might prevent you from coming back to therapy because you're like, I'm not ready to deal with that. So it's a fine line dance with that. But the beautiful thing too is, and I was telling Michael about this, um, that I have another woman who has done hundreds of mandalas. And at one point in time, we laid all hundred, some of them out in chronological order of how she had created them. And you were able to visually see how she had grown artistically, in addition to emotionally, and how she handled conflict. And that wouldn't have worked if I went back to my notes and said, okay, so like on December 15th, you said this, this, and this. It's pretty far gone. But being able to have this is what you produced on that day brings back all that memory. Does
Hmm.
that make sense?
Yeah, it would seem like, in a lot of psychotherapy modalities that having some skills and some of those tools would be very, very useful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Never a dull moment.
Mary Beth, I had my granddaughter over here the other day. She's 14, be a freshman this year, and I showed her the video of the recording, and I do a lot of videos, so I ask them to look at it because they can criticize it. They don't hold back. They tell me when I'm doing something wrong. Uh, but to my surprise, she said, "Oh, I'm doing art therapy." Now I realized that she was going to a therapist, and I didn't pry into that, so I didn't know she was doing art therapy. So I said, "Well, what does this mean to you?" And she said that when she's doing art therapy, she will talk to her therapist while she's drawing. And she says it relaxes her and she can communicate better while she's in the act of drawing. And that kind of surprised me, but I wanted to hear what your thoughts were about that. Is that common?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's just because again, you meet the client where they're at. And so if it's relaxing for them to work on something. I've got one woman who comes in and she's like, okay, I need something to color. And one of my stress relief things that I do if I've got time between clients is in pencil, I'll just draw out mandala design. And so she says, I need something to color. I give her my stack of like scrap paper and mandalas, and she picks out designs that she likes, and then she sits and colors while she talks to me. So, for some, they already have a direction. For some, it's kind of what do I want to say, a distraction that helps relax them. Some folks need a directive, so you give them a directive, and it shows up differently for a lot of different people.
Yeah. But to Steve's comment before, you were talking about the left brain, right brain. Is it while you're trying to process things on your left brain side, if you're engaging the right side, I mean, I'm stretching this out, but could that be a way of seeking that balance that you're not sitting with your arms crossed talking to someone, but
Yeah.
you're doodling or you're painting, and while you're engaged in that, you're also processing your thoughts. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, because if you think, I don't know, do you guys know about EMDR?
I
Eye,
don't
mov- eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's
know.
a modality that's been around for, I don't know, 30, 40 years. Um, but just as the name would suggest, eye movement, we are actually having folks follow our fingers with their eyes moving back and forth. And early on, it was theorized that that helped process traumatic memories because we were engaging both the left and the right brain. And so additional research and investigation into that has come up with another particular art therapy approach of um, bilateral drawing. And so using both hands to draw at the same time.
Hmm.
So similar to what your granddaughter was saying, she's talking about perhaps these upsetting things while engaged in this rather pleasant doodling. So being able to kind of, and it's not really, I mean, we got to have both halves of our brain to work, and they're not isolated hemispheres for sure. But that does help process things along. And even like Steve, I think you had said that, you were dyslexic in school, and a lot of kids, while they're listening to lectures, will be doodling because that helps them listen and pay attention. And it helps with the processing. And so, I think teachers are getting aware of that kids are still paying attention, even if they happen to be creating whatever they're creating in their notebooks, because it's a dual attention that helps with that processing.
Hmm. That surprises me a little bit.
Hmm.
That drawing helps process.
Well, that doodling helps you if you're listening to someone speak or give a lecture or whatever. Uh, Myself, when I start doodling, I get into the doodles. The rest of the world fades out of here. I don't hear a word you're saying.
Might be a little hyperfixation there, but
That's why I was not doodling this whole thing. I meant to doodle, but I'll lose control here. Careful.
Uh,
I want to say the video that you did, Michael and Mary Beth, was really, really good. I really enjoyed that. And Michael, you're getting so good at this, it's scary. You missed your opportunity. Although you and
too,
yeah,
yeah. I'm too late to be Ken Burns, so I'm do the best I
Ken, there's nothing on you, baby.
can.
Oh, you really done so well with this, and I see
Right.
every time you do an interview, they seem to get better and better and better
Well,
on every level.
thank you. You're very kind. I appreciate that. Other questions, guys?
I have one last question. Does left-handedness or right-handedness make any difference in how you work, or do they represent something in the real world other than our imagination that right left-handedness means right brain and all the traditional stuff. Do we know much about that?
Yeah, I don't know as we do. And even with, and the majority of my grad students are usually fresh out of undergrad, so they're young 20s. And even some of them report that as lefties, oftentimes in school, that teachers were trying to convert them into being righties, which just really surprises me in this day and age. Um, I have my father and one of my younger sisters are left-handed. My dad is essentially ambidextrous. But I don't, dad definitely creative, sister, not so much. I'm right-handed. But I think, Lucia Cappuccioni was really wonderful in doing a lot of her journaling workbooks. And there's a really wonderful technique that I often suggest to clients to do if they're more focused on writing as opposed to visuals, but using your dominant hand, and it doesn't matter if that's your left or your right hand, using your dominant hand, write down a question that you would like to ask yourself, and then use your non-dominant hand to write the response, and then go back and forth and have a dialogue with yourself. And I think, just personally from having done that, I probably fall into the realm of being ambidextrous now because I can write pretty decently with my left hand. But the theory behind that is that when you use your non-dominant hand, your brain is concentrating so much on how to form the letters that you want to write that it's not really censoring or paying attention to that unconscious material that comes up. And so it's all the clients that I give that to really enjoy that and get some interesting results from that. But I think left or right-handed people are equally creative. Lefties might complain that, their hands smear something if they're going in one particular direction, but yeah.
One thing I noticed in fact, I think that prison sociological studies say that in most cultures, it's about 10% of people are kind of naturally lefties.
Mhm.
Give or take, of course, no matter what the culture, no matter where. The prison had prisoners in adult prisons have double and more of that. What I
Fascinating.
found really interesting is that when I was at the reformatory, there were a handful of people who were caseworkers moved up to middle management, unit directors, they call them, or whatever.
Mhm.
And the majority of those people were left-handed. So
Interesting.
I was kind of wondering whether that means there's something about left-handedness. I don't know any more about the studies than that.
Oh, you've
That
piqued my
there's something
interest.
about left-handedness that leads to problems in adjusting to the world as it is, and so that means trouble or potentially. You see what I
Right.
mean?
Right, which would make sense because really I don't know about the world, but the United States anyhow is set up for righties. Like, I remember, you know,
Only a
say
lefty can tell you how true that is and how pervasive that is. And
right.
I'm
And so
lefty and I've experienced a lot of that.
right. So if, from the get-go, when you show up in preschool or kindergarten, you're already othered, then, you know, and then, I mean, I think that that can just grow and grow from there. That would then probably be the underlying basis for those problems that you talk about.
I thought it was just Catholic schools. All the nuns taught me that left-handed, the root of the word sinister is left-handed. So
Interesting.
I thought they had a bias about that. But
Romans had it right. Dexter is right-handed.
yeah,
Dexter.
right.
There you were categorized.
Well, Mary Beth, I had one question that just occurred to me after David asked that is since your office is practically on the campus of the Kentucky School for the Blind, have you ever dealt with someone with a blind person or someone who has other physical limitations, and how does this therapy work with them?
Mm.
It's a really good question, and I ironically haven't had that many visually impaired folks as clients. The ones that I have had are sighted a little bit, so they just have to have what they're working on significantly closer to their eyes. Um, but again, and I think you and I talked about this as you were filming, sometimes it might not be a two-dimensional piece that we're working on. Maybe we're working with clay, maybe we're working with something that is more textured and kind of like you were talking about with, helping the folks to form the letters on the board, feeling that tactile aspect of it. So it's not, it's not that the visually impaired can't benefit from art therapy. It's just going to look a little bit different, um, working more with textures. I enjoyed this, and like I said, I hadn't had a chance to watch the other videos that Michael had done prior to his interviewing me, but I just finished them earlier today, and absolutely, you've done a great job, Michael, and I really enjoyed all of them.
Well, I'm glad to do it, and I wanted to tell you that obviously we have a we have a tilted audience here of white males. To go beyond that, they all went to Catholic school, so you got a kind of a stilted audience. If you ever would like to join us for some of our other discussions on other topics, I'd love to have you. I find it very interesting